Halfway through Jesus' ministry, just as he set his face for Jerusalem, he explains to his disciples that he must go there and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day raised to life. And Peter takes him aside and he rebukes him and he says, "Never, Lord, this shall never happen to you." Peter, though Jesus had told him, did not believe that Jesus would die and rise again. And after his crucifixion, after he's been laid in the tomb, the women come to the tomb and they are met there by an angel who says, "He's not here, he's raised as he told you." Jesus had told them that he would be raised, but they didn't believe him. So they came looking for him and expecting to find him in the tomb. And after meeting the angel, the women ran back. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women who were with them. And they told what they had seen to the apostles. But these words seemed to the apostles an idle tale, and they did not believe them. The apostles didn't believe the testimony of the women passing on the message that the angel had delivered to them, that Jesus had been raised to new life. Then Jesus later appears to all of the disciples, telling them to look at his wounds, to feel them. And we read, "Yet for all their joy, they were still disbelieving and wondering." Even when he was standing in front of them, encouraging them to prove it for themselves, that he was alive, yet they still doubted. And after all of this, it's Thomas who happens to miss out on Jesus' appearance to the disciples. And when they tell him that they've seen the risen Lord, he says, "Unless I see the marks of the nails in his hands and put my fingers into the mark of the nails and my hand into his side, I will not believe." Peter didn't believe. The women didn't believe. The apostles whom the women told didn't believe. The apostles didn't believe when Jesus was standing in front of them. But it's only when Thomas doesn't believe that we land him with the name Doubting Thomas. It's jolly unfair. None of them believed to begin with, and my goodness, I am so glad that they didn't. The Gospels would be utterly unconvincing if a dead man came back to life and all of the characters just accepted it, as if that were a fairly normal thing to happen. Oh, dead people, they come back to life all the time. Yeah, that's not unusual, no problem there. Nothing that anyone would struggle to believe. If that is how it were presented, we could write it off as being written by a bunch of people who are confused about the laws of nature or the operation of the human body. Or we would have to conclude that they just meant something different with the words that they were using. They certainly couldn't have meant that he literally came back to life if they found it easy to believe, because that is not an easy thing to believe. Or if all of the characters just immediately accepted it, then we might conclude that the disciples were just a bunch of really gullible people who were happy to believe anything that they were told. And if that were the case, we might want to ignore a good deal of what they have to say to us and what the evangelists have to say, all that's been recorded for us in the Gospels. It would all be thrown into doubt, because if they were so undiscerning about the resurrection, what less outlandish claims might they have failed to check? Or if all of the characters accepted immediately that a dead man had come back to life, we would have good reason to be suspicious. If you ask a police officer or a judge, they will tell you that two witnesses who disagree about a number of minor things are much more convincing than two witnesses who agree on every word. That's how you smell a stitch-up, isn't it? It's all too well rehearsed. It's too smooth. But thank God that the disciples were doubtful. And thank God that the gospel writers were courageous enough to record their doubts. This is the central claim of our faith, and it's an outrageous one, that a crucified man, proved dead by the stabbing of a spear into his side, rose to new life on the third day. It is impossible. It does not happen. And the disciples, they knew that. And thankfully, their first reactions are the same as our first reactions would have been. That is to say, I don't believe it. And even when their friends told them, they would not believe it. And even when they saw Jesus standing in front of them, they still struggled to believe. They were appropriately sceptical. And the appropriate level of scepticism for someone rising from the dead is to be very, very sceptical indeed. They were, and Thomas was, absolutely reasonable. This thing that you're telling me about Jesus is outrageous and unbelievable. I am going to need undeniable proof if you want me to believe. I need to see, and more than that, I need to touch the man to make sure. And thank God for their doubtfulness, Thomas and the rest. Because by their high level of doubt, we are provided a high level of assurance. We who base our faith on Christ's death and resurrection, we who are baptized into his death and resurrection, we who claim that same resurrection today for Shamari, we are blessed with the accounts of a bunch of sceptical, doubtful, incredulous and difficult to convince men and women who testify to us that Jesus was indeed raised from the dead. Not because they found it easy to believe, but on the contrary, because although they thought it impossible, they were presented with so much proof that they could not believe anything else. So God bless Thomas and all those who have harboured doubts. Their inquiring minds provide the firm bedrock for our faith. Amen.